It's good to see you. So today we're going to talk about forgiveness. And it's very interesting that Western forgiveness is different from Buddhist forgiveness. In Western culture, in our culture, forgiveness is very transactional, meaning that it is an exchange of something, or someone is indebted to another. And if you listen to our language around forgiveness, you'll pick up a little bit on this transactional element of forgiveness. You say, you owe me an apology. When a criminal is being punished, they are paying their debt to society. And so there's this idea that you must pay back for the harm you've done. And even in many religions, especially in the Western culture, we see this idea of we must do penance in order to be forgiven. Or we're forgiven and then we're asked to do penance as a way to make up for what we did wrong. So in the Western culture, forgiveness is very transactional. In Buddhism, forgiveness is different. The idea is that, the idea is that you've committed a wrong, and if you're the one who committed the wrong, you have now incurred some negative karma, and karma is always consistent. It's like gravity. It doesn't turn off. And so by engaging in that negative, unhealthy behavior, you have created negative karma that will persist forever. And so the idea of forgiveness is somehow trying to regain balance in that. So if you did the wrong, the idea is that you try to either do something to undo or to heal the harm that you've done, or put out some positive karma related to the act, the negative act, to somehow balance out the negative karma. And if you're the one who was wronged, then again, the idea is that you are going to do whatever possible to prevent more negative karma. And you're going to do whatever possible, both sides, whether you did the negative act or the act was done upon you, the idea is to reduce suffering and increase happiness or peace. So it's important to keep those two things in mind as I talk here about different elements then of forgiveness from both perspectives. From the perspective of if I have to forgive another, or if I have to be forgiven by another. So let's take that first one. If I have to be the one seeking forgiveness. So if I've done something wrong and I need to ask for forgiveness, there are four main things that we need to keep in mind as we do this. One is we have to appropriately and in a healthy way regret what was done. We have to be able to accept responsibility for the action. That was my action and my decisions. We have to accept that those actions come from somewhere. There's something within us that allowed that action to come into fruition. And that you intend then to remove those patterns, those underlying elements that can bring about more of that negativity. Now, regret is different from guilt. And the image that I heard that I really liked was, if you drank a cup of liquid and you later found out that it was poison, you regret drinking the poison, but you don't feel guilty about it. So from the Buddhist perspective, it's not about culpability, because if you look deeply into the idea of no self, and from the absolute truth perspective, then it's very difficult to pinpoint one thing or person that is at fault. Everyone, because of our interconnectedness, are involved in some way in that action. So feeling guilty or feeling culpable is not very helpful, but it is helpful to be able to own the negative action, own the suffering that you created, own the negative karma that you generated. Okay? So that needs to be important. And so this is also why an apology, a good sincere apology is, I am sorry that I did X, as opposed to, I am sorry that you were offended by this. So in that second example, we are basing our apology on the assumed mental state of the other, as opposed to the first example in which we accept our part of the action. The next element then is to remedy, okay? And actually it's not next. These are the 4 elements in different combinations that you want to work towards. So it's not a step. So the first thing I mentioned happened to be to regret, to own the action. And that could be pretty much the first step, because you need to know what you did wrong. But then after this, you know, one is called reliance, to re-engage. It's not only acknowledging that what you did was somehow out of step with mindfulness and attention, but it's also a wanting to re-engage in being mindful and attentive. So your negative act that caused the negative karma stemmed from a moment of inattention, a moment of non-mindfulness. And so a forgiveness then, or asking for forgiveness or being forgiven, requires a sort of a desire to re-engage with being mindful and attentive, especially in the area that caused the negative reaction, since you don't want to do this again. And this usually takes a place of sort of re-establishing our practice. And this is one of the reasons why rituals like doing 108 prostrations, that is a penance that's done at the temple sometimes. So they will chant the names of different bodhisattvas, and after each name you prostrate, you do a full prostration onto the floor and stand up, and you do that 108 times. It's the closest thing to Buddhist calisthenics you're gonna find. The purpose of those rituals, or purification rituals, or confession, is this element of reconnecting with your spiritual nature, with your Buddha nature, with the idea that you want to be healthier. Then another element of forgiveness is the remedy. This is when you apologize, or you do make amends, or you do some sort of restitution, or the idea is that you want to make things right again. And so the action afterwards, the making amends, should be related in some way to the negative act. And so if the negative act was that you insulted another person, you know, that damage from that negative act, that karma, will last forever. But you can balance it out then by sincerely focusing on some of the positives of the person you insulted, praising those positives, letting them know that you see the positive in them, as a way of trying to balance out then the negative karma you created earlier with some positive karma. But what if the person's not available to do that? What if the person dies? What if the person is, what was a stranger on Facebook that you'll never meet again, or see again, or talk to again, what do you do then? So the idea is that you are going to try and create some sort of positive karma related to the negative action. And so if we use the example again of insulting, if you got really angry at someone on Facebook or social media and you insulted that person, then you make attempts at trying to, one, fix that within you, figure out what was it that caused you to be inattentive and unmindful and to speak those harmful words, and what can you do to change that? So that's one way to create more positive karma. Defend others, maybe even defend someone who's not from your perspective or your political side, and say, hey, although I disagree with that individual wholeheartedly, that individual has a right to express their opinion without being insulted. And so there I'm putting out some positive karma related to my earlier offense as a way of trying to balance out the karma. And finally, you want to do some sort of make some sort of resolution that you will not act that way again. And that can be tricky because it does require you to kind of figure out what were the underlying reasons for why you did what you did. And to be mindful of the ways you might defend or justify your actions. And so a good rule of thumb is if it created, if I was the one who created suffering, then there is no justification for that. Okay? Obviously, these are absolutes and there will be exceptions. And so Buddhism is not about absolutes. And so if I say something that is sincere and honest, and the other person is in a state of mind where they created the suffering for themselves, there's little I can do about that. I can try to make it better, but I do those things in a way that does not mean that I am untrue to my own self or to my own Buddhist ideals. Okay? So it's a balancing act, and it's not always easy, as we know from personal experience. Now let's take the other perspective. Let's say I have to forgive another. It's important that we realize that there's a lot of misconceptions about what forgiveness is. So I'm going to talk about a few of the main misconceptions of things to keep in mind when you are being asked to forgive another. We have this phrase in English, forgive and forget. That is a myth, that is a misconception. It's also impossible. So Buddhism is about seeing the reality in this world, and the reality is that barring any damage to our brain, you are never going to forget certain harms that were done to you. You may forget some of the smaller ones, but forgiveness isn't about forgetting. For the most part, that's impossible to do. Also, one of the things about forgiveness that sometimes makes it hard for us to forgive is the idea that the memory always comes back to haunt us. And so we feel then that that memory injures us again. It's another wound. And so in that instance, we need to be very mindful of it, acknowledge that it was there, honor that you have this memory of it and that it's not something that's going to go away, and then choose not to engage in it. So you don't have any control over the memory that pops up on its own, but you do have control of how much attention you're going to give it. And that's a lot of it actually is mindfulness as well. That's what we practice in meditation, is being more attentive. And so you can choose how much attention you're going to give this memory. And so if you're in a moment where you really can't give it much thought, or you're in the middle of doing something, or you're with someone, you want to be present for them, then you acknowledge the memory, acknowledge that you have little control over when this memory pops up, but then say, now is not the time, and I'm not going to give you the attention right now. But there are times when giving it attention is a good thing. Maybe you are in a better state. Maybe you're currently meditating, the memory pops up, and you're in a calm, peaceful state of mind where you can explore the memory and explore the feelings around this memory. And so that's a time when giving it attention can be healthy. Another myth about forgiveness is that this idea that somehow once I forgive, the anger that I have or the feelings that I have just go away. And the truth is that it doesn't. Very rarely. We might remember those few occasions when something happened where it was such an intense emotional moment. We were able to forgive the individual. We were hugging and crying and kissing, and we were like, it's going to be okay now. And those are beautiful moments, so we have to honor those moments. But the majority of times, forgiveness doesn't work that way. And so it's a conscious choice. I have to make a choice, and usually it's multiple times. We may remember those times when we forgive, and after that one time we forgive, it's done, and we never have any bad feelings about that person. Those are wonderful moments, but they're also rare. Real, more common forgiveness is something you do every time. So every time the memory pops up, I forgive that person. Every time the anger makes a resurgence, I forgive that person. So you're making a conscious choice to forgive that person every single time your thoughts or your feelings bring up the injury or the hurt. I want to mention this also. Like the memory, where I said you have a choice of how much attention to give it, the same thing for the emotions tied to the hurt. So usually it's anger or sadness. And so when that anger and sadness come up, again, you acknowledge it, you respect your right to feel anger, your right to feel sad about the situation, but you get to choose how much attention to give it. And if you feed the anger and sadness at the wrong time, it's only going to drain you of energy, make you feel miserable, make you feel more angry, and it's just not the right time. But if you're in therapy, if you're in meditation, if you're with a trusted friend and you're ready to explore that anger, those are appropriate times then to give that anger attention and really see if you can learn something new. Another myth, and I've seen this every once in a while creep up, and it has different ways of creeping it up, is forgiveness is not an endorsement. Forgiveness is not saying you're right. Forgiveness is not saying that it was okay that it happened. It's not okay. It wasn't right. Right? So forgiveness is not accepting that it's okay for that to happen. What forgiveness is accepting that you don't have control of the past, so you can't change what happened, but you do have control of the present. And so forgiveness is not about saying, oh, that's okay, it's all right. No, if it were okay or all right, you wouldn't feel hurt. So forgiveness is not about saying it's okay. Forgiveness is about accepting, I can't change the past. I can't undo the karma that action produced, but I have control of the present moment, and I can produce positive karma now. And I can produce less suffering for me and maybe for others now. And I can be happier and at peace now. Forgiveness doesn't have to be a condition of reconciliation. The other person does not need to pay off their debt. The other person does not need to apologize first before you can be happy and at peace. When you say that I cannot forgive that person until they apologize, you are setting a condition on the forgiveness, a condition that is not under your control, a condition that is now under the control of another. And the majority of times in our life, those apologies don't come. And so if you make your own forgiveness and your own peace of mind a condition of someone else's actions, then you're only setting yourself up for more suffering. You can forgive someone even before they apologize. Some of that can be done through understanding and wisdom, understanding the conditions that led to that individual's negative actions. It does not justify what they did. It does not make the hurt or the negative karma okay. But understanding where it came from and understanding that you yourself are also flawed can be helpful in forgiving the person, even if it means that you're going to be more cautious around that person, or you're going to avoid that person, or you're going to cut that person out of your life altogether, because right now in this moment you don't have the strength or the spiritual maturity yet to deal with that person in a positive way. So forgiveness does not mean that you are going to automatically get back to the relationship the way it was. Very likely, the relationship will need to change. You can still forgive them, but then there will be changes in the relationship that will be more protective and healthier, hopefully for both or for everyone involved. I think the last thing I would mention is that be mindful when you go into meditation, and if these feelings or memories pop up, be mindful that even though anger and sadness are usually the most dominant emotions, pay attention, because a lot of times there's some other smaller underlying thoughts and emotions that we're not aware of. And if we sometimes become aware of those smaller elements, we tend to unravel the whole thing and makes it a lot easier than to forgive. So be mindful of the smaller emotions. Be mindful of the fact that you can have mixed emotions. You can have multiple emotions at the same time, even paradoxically. Being happy and angry at the same time is possible. It sucks, but it happens. And so being mindful of those tiny emotions that are there can be very helpful as well. I'll leave it at that because I gave you a lot today. And so you may want to review the video. I'll post the video. But there are a lot of different, I think the main thing to keep in mind is when in our society we talk about forgiveness, our society is usually talking about paying one's debt. But in Buddhism, it's about restoring balance. The action that caused the pain and suffering created negative karma that will persist for all eternity. And so the balance comes when we can somehow create a positive energy, a positive karma that can balance out that negativity and maybe hopefully even overcome it. Being mindful that sometimes that our brains are more attuned to hurt than to the positive. And so when you hurt someone, and this can be relevant especially in relationships, any relationship, when you hurt, the rule of thumb in marital therapy is that for every one negative interaction, you have to do 7 positive interactions to overcome it. And it's because of how our brains are hardwired to pay attention to the negative more than the positive. So be mindful that if you're going to try and put out more positive karma to overcome the negative, while the amount of positive karma only needs to be equal to the negative karma, to the other person's perception, or maybe even your own perception, if you're the one who was hurt, you may be tempted to want more positive or to have to do more positive things to make up for that one negative. And it's just a rule of thumb. I mean, if the bad thing was I left the peanut butter on the knife when I put it in the dishwasher, that's a small one. So I don't need to do that many positives. But if the negative is infidelity, for example, then I'm looking at a lot of positives I will need to do to overcome that in the mind of the other person, which is different than from the universal karmic balancing sheet. But it's important to be mindful, especially for yourself. If you are the one who's hurt, then be mindful that you don't make the other person work harder than they need to. And that's where forgiveness comes in. Recognizing that the universal karmic balance is more important than your perception of what's balanced, what's right. I'll leave it there. I'm going to open up to any comments, thoughts, insights, anything you want to talk about. I'm going to go ahead and ask you all to unmute. So if you have something to say, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi. Thank you for doing this. I think like my main kind of like question out of all that, the lesson is like, what if it's someone that continuously hurts and tries to hurt you? You know what I mean?
Good.
And it's like you try to balance that out, but you know.
So then, multiple things to keep in mind. One, why are you still putting yourself in a position to be hurt? Why is that individual feel that they can continue to hurt others? What are the habits that are underlying those actions? And what protective factors should you put in place? Because remember, forgiveness does not necessarily mean that you go back to the way the relationship was before. And so there may be a need to change that relationship, to limit contact, or to put up sort of protective factors that will help you, or the other, or whoever is going through that experience. There's nothing saying that you have to be, allow yourself to be wounded over and over and over again. So we don't see many examples, even though Buddhists are pacifists, I don't see many examples in Buddhist stories of a Buddhist monk continue to do the same thing over and over again and allowing him or herself to be hurt. There is a change. And so you look for what can you control in that situation. And hopefully you have the wisdom to know what to change. And that wisdom can come from either from you or from talking with others who have been in similar situations. If it's a big issue, then therapy, talking to a monk. So you don't have to depend on you having the wisdom. Don't forget you're part of a larger community, and you can ask for that wisdom.
Thank you. Just boundaries, right?
Boundaries. Boundaries are healthy. Any other last minute thoughts, comments, insights, questions?
I just think it's funny, like my brain really hurts because I think it's funny that I never thought of this as everything is, I'm not one to always think of individualism, but like I never thought of comparing this topic to be more broad and wholesome to like, yeah, so I really enjoyed this one. It's going to challenge me for at least a week or so thinking about it. But yeah, thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Alex?
Yes.
Okay, because I lost the connection at a certain point. Thank you so much. This topic has been really helpful, and if it's possible to, talk one more time about this forgiveness issue, I think would be really helpful. It's very complex, very, very, very important, and thank you for your insight and feedback.
Sure. Yeah, and I know today was chock full of a lot of information. So when I will post the video up of the talk, and so when you are ready to hear it again, or then put play and take notes or do whatever to see what might help. There was a lot of information, so I'm sorry about that, but then again, not sorry. I hope it helps.
Oh yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
If there's nothing else, I do have some questions for you.